Welcome to another executive interview for Becoming Retail. Becoming Retail is a content series that looks inside the hearts and minds of leaders during digital transformation. And I'm super excited to have Orchid Bertelsen here today. She's the head of innovation at Nestle. And in the most 2020 thing ever, we met through Twitter. And so I've been blessed to have different conversations with her, but I'm super excited to quiz her in long form as opposed to 280 characters right now. So she's a great follow on Twitter. We'll see if we can give her the Becoming Retail bump. You can follow her at Orchid Bertelsen. And so let's just dive in. First of all, thanks for coming and being here. I appreciate it. Let's start off with your retail journey, and it is a journey for you to arrive in the retail ecosystem.
Yes. So first of all, Michelle, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very grateful that we did that Twitter still think holds on to its serendipity. I also appreciate the promotion. So I'm head of digital innovation for Nestle USA, which is a portfolio of about 40 to 45 brands, depending on what we're acquiring and what we're divesting at the time. And to Michelle's point, my career, I wish I could say I had a plan and I stuck to it. But the reality is that I kind of just, moved based on, what interested me at the time. So when I first graduated school, I actually thought I was going to be ambassador to the UN, go to law school. I actually applied to the CIA twice. Made it through different parts of the journey, which I don't know that I can really talk about. I'm as surprised as anyone that I ended up in the CPG retail space. So I've been at Nestle for about 5 years. I started as the digital strategist on the ice cream business. And then about 3 years ago, moved into my current role, which was created for me by our then CMO. This role was created because when you have such a vast portfolio of varying brands, everybody wants to run their own test and learn. And it's wonderful that, they have the curiosity and they're willing to try things and willing to fail and willing to learn. But to be honest, it gets a little unwieldy as an organization. So at the time, our CMO, really wanted a top-down strategy of what was the emerging technology we were going to focus on. When it came to innovation, what was the overall learning agenda? And then really just create more of a top-down strategy rather than bottoms up in terms of testing and learning. So my role was created.
Oh, that's
Now,
awesome.
yeah, no, it's funny, and Michelle, we talked about this before. I think that the role of luck and the idea of being at the right place at the right time is often discounted. I
Mhm.
think in American culture, everyone wants to believe that they're masters of their own destiny, and I think that we certainly are to a great extent. But you cannot discount the role of luck. And so before my time at Nestle, I actually was at a creative agency. I was in management consulting. I mean, you can tell I bounced around quite a bit. But I would say that my love of marketing really started when I had a quarter life crisis. This was while I was at the law firm. I was like, oh, well, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And as first generation, my parents are immigrants. You know, the prevailing thought is that you're going to be an engineer, a lawyer, or a doctor. And I had decided to go down the law path. And I spent 2 years at a law firm. I was like, oh yeah, I don't know that I'm cut out for this. And before jumping into something else, and only to realize that that wasn't for me either, I decided to take a pause. And I actually ended up going back to retail, which is a job that I had when I was in high school. So I worked at the Gucci in Tyson's Corner, just outside of DC, as a sales supervisor. And you know, when customers come in, they're not really looking for a bag to hold things in, right? They're not looking for something functional, because if they were, they probably wouldn't spend $2,000 on a handbag or really ask how the leather was treated or what the history of it was. And so it was really in that role that I got to conduct one-on-one interviews all day with customers to truly understand what they were looking for and to really find the product that would match whatever it was that they, felt was lacking. Gucci is such an amazing brand. I was able to really talk about the brand story, the craftsmanship, the heritage. And it was there that I realized, oh, I mean, I'm getting paid for this now. So how do I do this at scale? And so at that time, I moved into a marketing role at a consulting firm in DC, and it's just kind of been like bouncing around since then.
Awesome. And then eventually you went over to the client side at Nestle, where you were a digital strategist. And I noted that you worked in that role on the e-commerce strategy for ice cream with your retail partners. And that is, that's kind of obviously a few years ago where online grocery was not very popular. What was that experience, kind of being on the cutting edge of e-commerce from the brand side like?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about digital is that it's constantly changing, it's evolving. And so when you work in the digital space, you get to work on new things all the time. And when I started with the ice cream division, I mean, e-commerce, obviously we've seen e-commerce grocery growth just really explode over this past year. But when you're working on frozen and refrigerated products, it still tends to be a bit challenging. So a few years ago, while I was with the ice cream division, the question really was, hey, we know that e-commerce for groceries is only going to grow. So what is our overarching strategy? Where should we really place our bets and where should we focus our efforts on? So as with anything in the digital space and with e-commerce too, what you're really trying to find is the opportunity. And we really believe that the opportunity sits at the intersection of consumer, brand, category, and cultural tension. So with ice cream, ice cream tends to be a bit of an impulse purchase, for a variety of reasons. I think when you go grocery shopping or buying frozen foods in general, it tends to be a challenge to go straight home, right? You can't run any additional errands after that. So it is a process and a journey that has a lot of friction. So with ice cream, we really said, all right, who are the big e-commerce grocery players in the space right now? Are there things that we can build together, of the components of e-commerce? And there's a saying that I love, which is that e-commerce isn't just one thing to the consumer. And so it shouldn't just be one thing to us. E-commerce is really just a collection of activities. And anytime you have a collection of activities and no silver bullet, you really need to prioritize, what you need to focus on. So for us, it was very much about product detail pages of making that online shopping experience as robust as possible. Now,
Mhm.
as a manufacturer, it's always a bit challenging because we don't own a lot of the consumer experience, especially around the point of conversion. So the plan at the time was really to just break, e-commerce ice cream down into its individual components and prioritize where we were going to focus. And it was largely online grocers because even the instant delivery space was pretty nascent at the time.
Excellent. And now you're the head of innovation at the Center of Digital Excellence. Um, can you talk about what that role is, what the center does, to give our audience an idea?
Yeah, of course. So overall, with innovation, I mean, there are a lot of players, even within our company. I think when you think about CPG innovation, your head tends to go to product innovation. So product innovation in terms of size, format, flavors, that largely sits within our brand teams. But my space is wholly focused on digital innovation, and that's the consumer facing experience. So you mentioned the Digital Center of Excellence. It is a model for big companies like ours, and I've worked across other CPG players as well when I was part of a creative agency. And it's a model for us to really bring subject matter expertise into the organization. So the way that you should think about centers of excellence is really an internal consultancy. Now, there are teams within the centers of excellence, and I'm in the digital one. There are also experiential centers of excellence. We have a design center of excellence that focuses largely on packaging design. We have consumer insights, which is really considered a center of excellence as well. So we all have various roles and responsibilities. And to be honest, there are different ways that we engage with the teams themselves as well. So there are some projects where we're very much a guide or a consultant to the brand team. Whereas there are certain capabilities that my innovation team builds that we do with brand input, but these are projects that we entirely own. We find the opportunity, we fund it, and we build it so that it can scale across the business, and so other teams can tap into that. So an example would be we can talk about brand websites. So, when it comes to testing and learning, oftentimes you're really reliant on your brand website, right?
Mhm.
From a growth hacking perspective, and so our process tended to be quite long, quite expensive. It was a bit cost prohibitive when all you have is an idea.
Right.
So I have a project now that, we started building last year that allows us to launch websites in a matter of days rather than months and for very minimal investment. And so, it's a building of a capability like that, it is consumer facing, but what it really does is build the capability within our organization so that we can test value propositions with speed and agility.
That's amazing. And so you're sort of the internal hub for digital innovation that the brands can tap into, and then you can also push ideas out too.
Yes, and within innovation teams, and you see this again across organizations, is not unique to ours. There's always this idea of pull versus push projects. So a pull would be, maybe a brand team submits a brief for something that they're thinking about, and we would see if we would staff against that. Again, if it's a one-off, we probably won't do it. But if it's something that aligns with our overall organizational learning agenda or innovation learning agenda, we would put resources against it. There's also the push model, which is the one that we actually have moved to, which is that you have a centralized strategy and a plan. And depending on what you know of the business, you can actually look across the 40 brands and pick and choose which brands you want to test it with. So that gives us a little more flexibility. A double-edged sword because at the end of the day, we all want to drive business impact. And there's some
Yes.
activities that are a little closer to it than innovation. I think a lot of activities probably, but for us, it's the push methodology is just much, I think, more efficient. It's more effective because we know all of the brand plans across the 40 brands. We know the division priorities. We know what their goals are. And so what we're really trying to find is the sweet spot between, an agile brand where that innovation project will actually contribute to them meeting their business objectives.
That's really awesome. I want to take it up to like the 30,000-foot view, and we could probably have a whole interview based off of this one question, but how does one innovate?
Well, if someone knows, please tell me. No, I'm just teasing. With innovation, I think it's almost a buzzword at times. Again, I kind of mentioned this before. Innovation can refer to a lot of different things. And even when you think about what is considered innovation in the US versus other parts of the world, the US has this mentality that something has to be entirely new and never seen before for it to be innovative. Whereas my definition is a little broader. I think that innovation can happen when you're bringing something interesting from a parallel industry into yours, or if you are, I guess my definition is that innovation is creative problem solving, is finding new solutions to old problems. So my definition tends to be a little broader. Now, the way that we go about it is it's actually quite process driven in a good way. I think there's also this misconception that innovation is just a bunch of people sitting in a room, putting post-it notes on a wall, and you're just really throwing big ideas out there.
Mhm.
But for innovation to truly work, especially in a large organization, you really have to have a process so that you are running a lot of projects at any given time, but you have a process in place so that you know when something's going to be a winner versus something that, is a project that you might need to kill. So for us, innovation is really about finding solutions, right? And so in order to build a solution, you have to understand the problem that you're trying to solve first. And innovation, I see people do this all the time. which is that they'll start with the solution first. And in emerging technology is extremely attractive, right? You've got blockchain, you've got last mile delivery, like that is the bright and shiny thing. And so you're like, oh, we need to do that. And my question back to those teams is always why? Why
Mm.
are we doing this? What is the problem we are trying to solve? So when evaluating the opportunity, it really sits at the intersection of brand, category, cultural, and consumer tensions, right? You want to find a consumer problem that your brand is uniquely positioned to solve for. So that's kind of the opportunity identification part. Then the solution building, and I think a lot of us in the innovation space have seen this Venn diagram from IDEO, which is a solution needs to sit at the intersection of desirability, feasibility, and viability. So desirability, do people want it? Feasibility, can we build it? And it's not only can we build it, is that, with technology and emerging tech, there are things that are at the peak of the hype cycles where the technology is just not as mature as the vision for what it can be. So feasibility is, can we build it or can anyone build it? Because we do partner quite a bit on certain projects. And then lastly, and this is actually more important than people think, but the idea of viability. Can we make money off of it? And I simplify that. It's not about revenue truly, but think about if you have a solution that solves a true consumer problem that only your brand can provide, and yet it doesn't pay for itself, nor does it make money for the organization. The reality is that organization is not going to continue to throw money into a solution that solves a problem, but that they can't financially make sense of. So with building solutions, it really does have to hit, all those three dimensions.
That's great. Thank you so much for breaking it down in such digestible bits, and illuminating the process behind innovation. It's not just a dartboard type of approach. And it brings me to my next question, which is when you think about where to place your bets, like how do you evaluate success? I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, financial feasibility is important, but there are other metrics that you kind of set out to score yourself against.
Yes.
Mm.
So when it comes to defining success, what's really nice in innovation is that you can kind of you have an open charter to define it in a way that makes sense for you, your business, and your project. Oftentimes with innovation, people expect an ROI or a path to profitability. And I'm not saying that's not possible. I think it is, but it can't be the only way you're evaluating success for an innovation project. So oftentimes we'll say, ROI actually can stand for return on insights. Are we going to learn something through this process that we wouldn't otherwise learn through anything else that we're doing? And will it make the organization better? So I'll give you an example. For when it comes to understanding our consumers better, I think everybody takes a page from Amazon's book of consumer obsession.
Mm.
But within a large manufacturer, there are actually very few touch points where you're getting direct feedback from the consumers on a regular basis. A large one is customer service. So there's a lot of great data and feedback that we get through our customer service teams. Another one is through ratings and reviews. So the process now is that a brand associate or a brand manager will go on maybe periodically to read the ratings and reviews for their product, and then also for the competitors. Now, our customer service teams do manage and monitor ratings and reviews for our own products quite often. But what they're not doing is looking at competitors and seeing where there may be some opportunity. So what we did was we worked with this one company and using natural language processing was able to just, kind of index all of the ratings and reviews on publicly available sites to understand what consumers, in aggregate were saying about our competitors and also how that stacks up against, what they're saying about us and our products on various dimensions, right? Probably flavor, packaging, overall consumer experience. So that's an example where we use technology to improve on a very manual process. Now, the technology itself is not going to replace humans. I mean, I think we could have an entire other conversation about the role of artificial intelligence in organizations. But what it does do is that it takes on a lot of the tedious work that a brand team was doing. And now they can have more impact and free up their time because what they're going to do now is analyze and synthesize the data rather than consuming it and aggregating. So I would provide that as a really good example of, hey, here's something where we're not going to make money off of it. There's no clear ROI to it,
Mhm.
but we're able to get better and more consumer insights that are impactful for our business.
And conversely, we talk about success and measuring your objectives and how you're doing. What happens when a project fails? I mean, there's a lot of failure inherent into innovation. How do you encourage people to take risks? How does your company encourage people to take risks? And how do you just sort of handle that so people are, pushing the envelope, but maybe not too far?
Right. That's a great question. I think we're all a bit risk averse, especially when your career or your reputation might be on the line. So there are a couple of things that you can do as an organization. I think one is to create a culture of psychological safety, right? And what you're going to need is you're going to need a couple of people to fail on purpose and fail publicly within the organization. And to show that it's okay, you're not going to get fired because you failed. And failure is entirely tolerated within innovation. If you're not failing, you're probably not pushing hard enough, is my personal opinion on that. It's similar to I took up skiing later in life, and my husband's like, if you're not falling, you're not trying hard enough. And I was like, I just kind of, I don't know that I, I was like, I don't know that I need to fall. I'm not like training for the Olympics. Um, but, but with failure, it's almost like with innovation projects, failure is almost like a sigh of relief sometimes because failure's easy to wrap up. If something failed, you do your, postmortem report and you share the learnings on what you learned and like you kind of call it a day. Now, success comes with its own challenges because let's say you built a proof of concept or a pilot and you were successful on one brand in one division. Now I've got 40 to 45 brands in my portfolio. So how do you scale that? So scaling is often more difficult. And so as we go into a proof of concept, we're already thinking about what we're kind of planning for success, right? So what does version 4 look like? What does version 10 look like? What kind of security or legal or procurement processes do we have to go through in order to scale? So I would say the difficulty lies in success. Good problem to have. But I do think that you need to highlight both successes and failures in order to get an organization comfortable with pushing far enough.
Mm. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I'm gonna switch gears a bit. And in talking to you and reading your tweets, you just it seems like you have a dream job, right? You get to dream up the future of for Nestle, which is an amazing brand. What advice do you give for people who are maybe just starting out in their career who want to get into innovation and maybe also for people who want to be more innovative in their own roles or move into that sector. So tell us, what's the secret?
There's no one secret, unfortunately. And maybe I should tweet about my failures
Yeah,
more
I love
publicly.
that.
I should
Well,
probably do that. Um,
there's a tweet thread for you.
yeah, exactly. Exactly what it feels like to fail and why it's okay and why it's encouraged. I think, yeah, I've only worked in very large global organizations. I don't know what it is about them that keeps on attracting me. But one thing that I have learned is that there's more flexibility and creativity when it comes to creating the role that you want inside large organizations than you would think. So I think a lot of people starting in their careers, again, have a checklist and say, all right, if I accomplish X, then I get this. And then once I accomplish Y, then I get this, right? Like a very linear path. The reality is that if you don't want to subscribe to that, or if your dream role doesn't exist, you could potentially make that happen, right? With a bit of hard work and proactiveness. So that kind of goes to another thing I've learned is that before they give you the new job, you got to already be doing it. So there is no one is sitting around saying, "Hey, like I wonder what the next 3 jobs for Orchid looks like." Um, because especially in the innovation space, like I have no idea. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So I would say you have more flexibility than you think when it comes to creating the job that you want, but you also have to do that job and prove that you can do it and it is important to the organization before someone hands it to you or makes it official. So those are 2 pieces of advice, I guess.
Great. Thanks. I appreciate it. And, we can't have a conversation in 2020 without talking about the pandemic. So I'd like to get your thoughts on how the pandemic has impacted the innovation space.
I'm sure that's a big question. I think a lot of people have asked me how the pandemic has impacted me and my team's work. And we are actually busier than ever for very good reason. What the pandemic has shown us is it almost pulls back the curtain on what a primarily digital future looks like. Now, consumer behaviors will it's like a pendulum swing. So it'll swing back a little bit when things start to open up again. And we can talk about the new normal all we want. But I think during the pandemic, because everyone is remote, because we're experiencing such extreme circumstances, where truly the only safe way to connect is digitally. I think that is showing a lot of organizations who have been talking about digital transformation as a goal, but maybe not something tangible, that it is something that they have to focus on. So, new consumer behaviors are being created every day. You've seen the companies that have, either higher stock prices or performing better, or, I think made the shift from niche to like very household names, and how they've been able to, really continue to serve people during the pandemic. So, again, I think the pendulum will swing back. I don't think we're all going to be stuck in our homes and the only way that we can reach out to people is digitally for forever. But we do need to prepare for the habits that people have created that will stick. And I think that the pandemic has shown the power of digital, and brought it to the masses.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to follow up with just getting your thoughts on what role does innovation play in digital transformation?
Yeah, that is also, you're full of the big questions. Um, Well, with digital transformation, yeah, we've kind of talked about this before. There's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that you can do that makes you all of a sudden transformed. And to back up a little bit too, when it comes to digital transformation, one question I ask companies all the time or teams is that, what do you want to transform into? Because if you don't have a view of what the goal is or what the future is for you, you can't start to plan out what it takes to get there, right? It's very similar to running a marathon. Like you have a clear goal, 26.2 miles. I did it once. I will never do it again. But you have a very concrete goal and you have to finish within, I think it's like something like 4 to 5 hours. So then what you can do is evaluate your physicality today. So how far can you run today? And then since you know where you have to go and you have a good assessment of where you are today, then you know how much progress you need to make. So I think with digital transformation, the most important thing to understand is what you want to transform into and also provide a very honest assessment of where your organization is or your team is today. Then in order to get there, I'm going to, continue to stretch this marathon analogy, is not just running more, right? You got to do some weight training. You have to watch what you eat. You got to watch your water intake. There are things like that. So it's a little bit of everything. And digital transformation is the same. It's a coordination of different activities that will get you to where you want to be. So the role of digital innovation is finding the new solutions. And so I do think that innovation absolutely helps digital transformation because you're transforming and you actually need some new ways to do that because the current ways of doing your business isn't getting you there. So by nature, you're going to have to do some new things. And I do think that the process of like testing and learning and iterating and getting better and having steady improvement that is inherent to innovation is absolutely necessary for digital transformation.
That's amazing. I could speak to you for hours, and I'm sure I will throughout the year, both on
Yep.
Twitter and in person, or at least over the phone right now. But thank you so much. I'm going to end on our favorite question here at Becoming Retail, which is if you had one word to describe the retail industry, what would it be?
When I think of retail, the one word that I would use to describe it is opportunity. I think that across the space, and you're seeing this, across categories, there is so much opportunity to improve that experience. And I think there are a lot of us that, I mean, it's kind of an old Forrester prediction that by 2020, products and brands will be competing on experience rather than price. And I think that's absolutely true. So what consumers are looking for, if they're just looking for the product, you kind of get into this weird space where you're competing on a commodity, right? Where it's a one to one, it's the thing, it's not differentiated. And so what people are looking for is truly a good experience. I think you see this a lot in the QSR space has been really fascinating to watch over the last year. Fashion, I think, has always pushed the boundaries of this, of providing a really amazing experience. And I do think that grocery stores are kind of well positioned to truly transform their offering now to tap into and answer the new habits that people are adopting when it comes to buying food. So I do think I mean, I'm going to take a very optimistic view of this, and I'm pretty cynical. So I think this is a rare occasion, but I'm going to say there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to the retail landscape.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree that all this change, and like you said, a peek into the future is really challenging, but also a great opportunity to reimagine that future and what it will be like, and that's great. And thank you so much, Orchid, for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been fascinating.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's always lovely to see your face.